On this Thursday afternoon, another special edition of KnicksFanTV Live presented by KnicksFanTV.com. We are 3 weeks away from the NBA trade deadline, man. So we're going to talk about some of the latest NBA trade rumors with Michael Scotto from HoopsHype.com. But we got to talk about this breaking news first, Al, because just crossing over the newswire is that one Mitchell Robinson is out at least 3 weeks with a fractured thumb, had successful surgery yesterday. Knicks reporting that he's out 3 weeks, man, and couldn't come at a worse time for the Knicks as they, lost again last night to the Washington Wizards, lost 2 in a row. Tough schedule upcoming, facing the Hawks, facing the Raptors. They have games next week against the Cavaliers, the Nets, the Celtics. Schedule gets a little gritty here, closing in January. And look, obviously, this is going to hurt them as far as rim protection, their offensive rebounding, second chance points, the way they navigate pick and roll coverages, Mitch being that safety valve on the back end. It's going to hurt him, man. It's definitely going to hurt him. What's your thoughts on this right now, Al?
No Mitchell Robinson for 3 weeks. It's concerning, as you talked about, defensive-wise. He's our rim protector. He's a safety valve. Without him, I hope we get to see a lot of Jericho Sims because he's got the athleticism. We saw it last night. Hopefully, Tibbs sees that Hartenstein is not the defensive presence that we need in the starting rotation.
Yeah, he's been brutal.
It is what it is, man. He's more of an offensive big than a defender. So Jericho Sims, I hope he's ready, and I hope Tibbs sees that. He's the guy that needs to take up most of Mitch's minutes while Mitch is on the mend.
Yeah, and Michael, you were at the Garden on Wednesday night covering the Knicks versus the Wizards. How do you react to this Mitchell Robinson news?
Well, I'm going to zig. You guys zig. I'm going to zag. I'd like to see some more Obi Toppin minutes personally.
I was just going to say that,
because my thought process is you go a little I think Jericho Sims is certainly going to get more minutes, no question about it. And you guys touched on it from a defensive aspect for sure. Jericho Sims, in a way, plays a lot like Mitchell Robinson. He's going to block shots, a rim roller type, doesn't need the ball on offense, does a lot of the dirty work. Isaiah Hartenstein, more of a guy that's going to look to stretch the floor at times, like you guys touched on, offensive-minded. More in L.A. with the Clippers, you saw him a little bit as a passing big.
Yeah.
I think at this point for the Knicks, they've flirted with in the past Julius Randle and Obi Toppin together in the front court. Interesting mix there. I think it gives them more offensive versatility. For me personally, I'd like to see it. I've always thought, when Obi's had a chance to play more minutes, he's responded well. If you think back to last year when Julius was out towards the end of the year, he had some times, I think he had like 5 games at the end of the year where he was getting 30 minutes a game and he responded well. And I think for the Knicks, in a way, you need to see more of what Obi Toppin can do for you because looking ahead, you've got to figure out what you're going to do with him. And they did it with Immanuel Quickley as well. You got to give these guys minutes, see what they can give you, if they're going to be part of your long-term future or not, because you're going to have to pay them eventually as well. And what is a good range for them, you're not going to know unless you play them. I mean, obviously, there was some rumbling out there. I forgot who reported it elsewhere, but somebody had mentioned that maybe the Pacers had some interest in him. Well, if you want other teams to have interest in him, you got to play him. So I think for the Knicks, it's a good opportunity to do that. They're certainly going to miss Mitchell Robinson's defensive ability. He's a human fly swatter for them, and a good rebounder at that, at his size. So I think for now, the best bet would be to play Jericho at that spot and then give some minutes as well to Obi Toppin to see more what he can do. And you're looking at a minimum of 3 weeks. This is one thing. When they say they're going to get reevaluated, he may need more time after that as well. It's not a given he's coming back in 3 weeks. And the Knicks are going to have a tough second half of the season schedule coming up if you look at it. You alluded it to a little bit in the near future, but even looking further ahead, it's going to be tough for that. So the Knicks are really going to make their bones in the second half of this season. And then we're going to find out how good this team really is.
Man, tough loss just as this team was coming back together in full strength, losing a pillar in their defense at the 5. That's going to be a tough one. But, we knew the deal coming in when we re-signed Mitchell Robinson, that the durability concerns were going to be there. Comes up with a knick-knack thumb injury, and now he's going to be out for some time. But you hit the nail on the head. For me, First off, I want to see Sims getting elevated to that 5, although we'll see how Tibbs goes with it, because the last time Mitchell Robinson was out, Tibbs did kind of balance it out. You know, some games Sims started, some games Hartenstein started, depending on the matchup. I do hope he goes that route, but that was also their stretch that we saw Julius Randle and Obi Toppin playing some minutes together, especially in crunch time. So let's see if the Knicks go back to that, because, as you said, Obi needs more minutes to be productive on this team. Last night he got 12 minutes, 0 points. Other nights he's getting single-digit minutes off the bench as Tibbs is tight in this rotation. You're just not going to get much from him in those minutes, man. You got to lengthen the minutes for this kid, and I think the guards absolutely have to do a better job of just getting him involved, because right now this bench needs his production. You can't just rely on Quickley to get it done. They got to get it. They got to get it done from Obi as well.
Yeah, and look, without when you don't have, it's just stinks, because this is where you said to CP where we're going to see the Knicks come back healthy. It was fine. We got RJ back. We got Brunson back. And now we're going to see what this cohesive unit could do and get to like a true measuring stick. We got Boston next week, right? We got Philadelphia coming up soon. You're going to have Miami for most of the rest of the second half of the season. These are guys that are competing for a playoff position, play-in position, and this could be detrimental. Now, you mentioned that Tibbs has balanced Hartenstein and Jericho Sims. After last night, man, especially when you saw when the final minutes of the game, he didn't even go to Hartenstein after Jericho Sims fouled out.
Yeah.
And Sims played most of the game after Mitch went out. I hope this is, the turning point where Tibbs is not just doing it because whatever politics or maybe because Hartenstein's the new signing, but actually talent-wise, when you just watch it, Sims just covers so much ground, man, whether it's on the perimeter, being able to switch. That's the type of stuff that you need if you want to continue to have the defense that Tibbs likes to roll out there. So if I'm Tibbs and I'm being realistic, and you're not going to have Mitch, you got to have Sims out there. Now for Obi and Randall, that's what you talked about when Mitch was out. I'm curious to see how that's going to be utilized, because we're going to have some big lineups too that they got to face, right? And it doesn't make sense if you're going to go against some teams with true rim protectors or dynamic centers. But, like when you play up against Cleveland, do I really want to see a small ball lineup?
Twin Towers.
No.
Tibbs ain't going. Tibbs ain't going.
But I know that for a fact.
Yeah.
But when you think about what he said last night, where they have a lot of depth at center, he also noted Julius Randle as one of the 5s that he has for rebounding presence. I'd like to see that actually utilized rather than just being spoken. But to be fair, Obi missed some time as well. But I would like to see how they can finally get those guys going, being utilized together, because for some spurts, you can go against teams that are going to play big by just trying to run out in transition. And that was something the Knicks were strong at the beginning of the season, and they kind of stopped that. They've been doing a lot of half-court offense. Maybe it's time to move away from this isolation-heavy basketball, get back to moving the rock, and having these guys run out in transition.
Yeah, they definitely got to get out there and run, man. And we're talking to Michael Scotto of hoopshype.com. So to everybody in the chat, once again, let's get those likes up. Hit that thumbs up button for you boys. Michael, on the trade front, Cam Reddish's name has come up as the most likely candidate to be traded. What are you hearing so far in terms of destinations and anything in return? What are you hearing thus far on Cam?
As far as Cam, I had touched on previously on Hoops Hype, the Knicks were hoping to get 2 second-round picks for him. Now that asking prices dropped a little bit, as Mark Stein reported on his Substack, didn't surprise me, but at the same time, obviously the Lakers have been consistently calling and checking in, but they have a lot of different options out there as well across the board and across the league. They're obviously an active team in that regard. Milwaukee was a team that touched on him. And I think some of that was a little bit of due diligence. So to me, I'll say this, CP. I think Cam's got to go to a team that's more of a rebuilding team that's going to give him a chance to play through mistakes and get consistent minutes to really see what he can be. If you talk to people around the league, whether it's executives or scouts, they'll always say, well, he's the most naturally talented guy on a team usually. But it hasn't translated to consistency. This year he shot the ball better than he has overall. But I think it's from the get-go, it never seemed like Cam Reddish and Tom Thibodeau clicked.
No.
And at that point, once that happened, I think for the Knicks, at this point, it's almost like a sunken cost. You're not going to get back a first-round pick for Cam Reddish at this point. You know that. And I'll say this. I don't think it matters necessarily. Like, if you're getting a guy back, I think you're more, if anything, trying to recruit a draft asset. Because whoever you get now, you talked about it earlier, that Knicks rotation is tightened by head coach Tom Thibodeau. So who's going to come in right now and really have an impact? I think that's going to be a question. You know, Evan Fournier was out for a while. I joked that he was in the witness protection program because we hadn't seen him for about 20 games. And then he came back and looked a little rejuvenated there. So, I mean, I think that's the real question. Even if you are going to move Reddish, who are you going to get back that's probably on an expiring contract at that point? Because I don't see them necessarily wanting to take back a guy that's got money owed down the line, unless it's for a notable rotation guy. At that point, the Lakers certainly have plenty of guys on expiring contracts to get that done. And, you know, I'm curious to see, you know, if their second-round pick maybe would, you know, mean more to the Knicks than some other teams if they can get it. There's a lot of haggling going on across the league right now. But, you know, make no mistake, Cam Reddish is the clear number one trade target for the Knicks right now. That likely, you would assume, would not be back after the trade deadline. And I just think at this point it's best for both sides.
So, Michael, like you mentioned that rebuilding teams would probably be the type of environment that would be suitable for Cam Reddish. Well, we've heard the Lakers, the Milwaukee Bucks, and now based on Mark Stein's report, the Dallas Mavericks. Is there another team that we're not seeing then? Because a rebuilding team sounds more like, you know, the Orlando Magic, Houston Rockets, or one of those teams, another destination for Cam that may not be out there right now?
Yeah, I mean, again, that's my personal opinion. I think for Cam, it would be best suited for him. But, you know, as you touched on, the teams that are interested, like even Dallas, I think Dallas is it almost like raised an eyebrow for me because, yeah, I could see the Knicks wanting Reggie Bullock back. That was a Tom Thibodeau favorite. But if you're the Mavericks and you're kind of trying to win now with Luka, and you potentially, if anything, you know, they've been linked to Bojan Bogdanovic. I've touched on them having interest in him. That's a win-now guy. Reddish kind of surprised me with them a little bit. I think it's a little bit of due diligence in some ways. I'm not saying he doesn't end up there, but it definitely surprised me a little bit when I saw them being linked to him. The Lakers, it's pretty simple. It's the Clutch family. I mean, let's just, you know, call it what it is. And as far as, you know, other teams out there, I mean, like Milwaukee, well, for Milwaukee, they want some length and defensive versatility, which he can provide. And he's got some young upside, which they don't necessarily have a ton of on that team. You look at that roster, you know, maybe a guy like a Jordan Nwora, sure, but for the most part, they're a veteran team. He would give them at least a little bit of upside looking ahead. And, you know, when you're surrounded by Giannis and other really good players, maybe they think that he can expand on some of that potential that he's had there. So that's my thought on that. But to me, I think for Cam to play through mistakes, to get the most minutes that he could possibly have, it would be best to go to a rebuilding team. The question is, are those teams going to look to, you know, if they have some young wings, do they think Cam Reddish is worth it more at this point? Like, Cam's decently into his career now. So at a certain point, the potential, the upside card is going to get worn out at a certain point. It's nearing sooner or later that he has to put it together. And I think for him, you know, this is the second team, you get a third chance. It's almost like, in a way, a little bit of a make or break for his career looking ahead.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think maybe in this situation, you know, I've been trying to just really try to understand from different people I talk to, like how this kid went from starting some games to being in the rotation to being an absolute zero. But I think you hit it on the head. I just don't think Tibbs has the patience to allow him to play through his mistakes, to eat up minutes. At the same time, Tibbs is trying to win. He wants to tighten up his rotation. I just think the two sides were going in two different directions since he's been here, which is why I didn't think that the trade made much sense. The Dallas
CP, real quick, when they took him out of the rotation, right, and the Knicks weren't doing as well, you know, you started to hear a little bit of rumbling about I think like Ian Begley had reported it on SNY, there was a little bit of noise about Tom Thibodeau and, what could be for his future. And at that point, you notice, okay, he goes to guys that he values. Deuce McBride, defensive guy.
Yeah.
And I think you kind of saw the shift a little bit. Quentin Grimes goes into the starting lineup. Now, two reasons. One, Tibbs was always a Quentin Grimes guy, even from when he was a rookie. And Tibbs don't like rookies.
Yep.
Normally. So that to me spoke volumes. And two, you didn't put him in the Donovan Mitchell trade. So you better start that guy in play.
Yeah.
He's got to give production. So I think at that point, it just made more sense. And again, Tibbs and Cam just never clicked. And after that Dallas game, that was it.
Yeah.
Witness protection.
Out of there, man. Absolutely out of there. And you talked about teams needing length and defensive versatility. Well, there's a team that needs that right now, and they are called the New York Knicks. But let's run through some of these targets that have been linked to the Knicks and just, let me know what you think and what you're hearing. I mean, you have Gary Trent Jr. from Toronto, Malik Beasley from Utah. We have Zach LaVine. Then you have your vets, your Eric Gordons, your Jay Crowders of the world. What are you hearing in terms of the market for those guys?
All right, let's start with Zach because he's probably the biggest name.
Yeah.
The Knicks have been monitoring Zach because he's the type of guy that they feel is like a star kind of player. Once they didn't get Donovan Mitchell, their whole thing has been looking, who's the next star that's going to become available because they certainly have the draft capital to get it done. Chicago's underwhelmed so far this year. However, against some of the good teams, they have a good record. So in their eyes, they don't see themselves as sinking like the Titanic as everybody else around the league. I'm curious, if anything, if they're going to try to maybe buy more now, because in talking with Casey Johnson, the Bulls Inside, we recently had him on our Hoopside podcast, and he was almost mentioning it that way. I know they're trying to resist moving Pat Williams and Alex Caruso. Vooch was in trade talks a little bit over the summer. You heard his name floated out there with Rudy Gobert. Him being a free agent, I thought that would have been interesting. DeMar, they love DeMar. I think ultimately with Zach, when he was struggling in the beginning of the year, there was a little bit of a worry there. Now he seems like he's kind of rounded into form. So I think it's a little less likely, but obviously the Knicks and other teams certainly have him on their radar. You touched on Malik Beasley and Gary Trent Jr. Malik Beasley is a guy that certainly with Utah, because of his salary, is going to be talked about in a lot of trade talks. Previously, over the summer, I think he was in talks with the Lakers. When the whole Bojan Bogdanovic thing was going down, was he going to go for Russell Westbrook and whatnot when they were trying to move him? I think there was some noise recently that Mark Stein had put out about maybe Atlanta. He's from Atlanta. I just didn't know if I saw that because with Bogdanovic, it didn't really make sense to have those guys there. Now, if Bogdan got moved, then maybe that'd be a different story. But I actually interviewed Malik earlier this season, and he told me directly on the record he wants Utah to pick up his option, his team option for next year. He loves it there. He's the top three-point shooter in the league off the bench in terms of makes and a potential three-point contest participant, depending on how things shake out. I think for Utah, his salary makes him movable. I don't know if anybody's banging the door down to get him at this point, but he certainly had an improved season compared to last year. I think he's cleaned up his image as well a little bit, which has been important to him. He talked about wanting to be in the Community Assist Award running. And with Gary Trent Jr., look, I touched on this at Hoopside dating back to the G League Showcase. And when you talk to any executive around the league, the number one trade candidate for the Toronto Raptors is Gary Trent Jr. because most people think he's going to opt out this summer and that he could be a guy that's in the $20 million range given his shooting ability and his age. Remember, this guy's young. I don't think a lot of people realize how young he is still. And for Toronto, if they're going to keep the score as is, they're going to eventually have to pay Pascal Siakam. Fred VanVleet is going to become an unrestricted free agent this summer. And you've also got OG Anunoby, who's coming up down the road as well, if you want to keep him. A lot of people interested in OG Anunoby for his two-way ability on offense and defense. I think Gary, it'd be tough to kind of match the salaries at that point. Essentially, you would have to be giving out a pick for down the line. Do you want to give up a first-round pick for Gary Trent? I don't know if you want to do that and then you would have his the ability to, use rights and things like that to keep him, but why not just wait till the summer if you have the cap space? So I think that kind of limits his market a little bit there. And you touched on Jay Crowder, and I think who was the other guy?
Eric Gordon.
Okay. With Houston, with Eric Gordon, I would say that for them, there has been more of a willingness than ever before to move Eric Gordon. The asking price is still high. I don't think necessarily they're going to get a first-round pick for Eric Gordon. If they were, I think it would have been last year when he was shooting the ball really well. KJ Martin maybe could be packaged with him in a lot of talks. I certainly could see that. Look at the Phoenix Suns. That's a potential possibility for the both of them there in a 3-team trade that's been talked about ad nauseum. And Jay Crowder, I think for Jay Crowder, we had touched on this a little bit in our Hoops Hype notebook the other day, and our capologist Yossi Goslin touched on it. Frank Urbino, when he was doing the free agent stock watch. And I agree with this assessment, which was, I think he's kind of hurt his stock in the sense that you could have been on a team. I understand you're maybe not thrilled that Cam Johnson took your spot as a starter. I get that. But when you're on a team that's on paper coming into the year as a title contender, especially now with Cam being out all this time, you would have been playing anyway, probably starting. At worst, you would have been probably splitting the minutes with Cam Johnson. They're two totally different players. It makes people question, well, what's the objective here for Jay Crowder? Is it about you in a contract year, or is it about being on a title contender? Right. And at that point, that has raised some eyebrows with some executives around the league. He's been on different teams before, certainly, a number of them at this point. So I think for him and his trade, stock and whatnot, I think if they're going to move Jay, one, you may have to couple him with Landry Shamet to get a guy that's closer to maybe the $20 million range if they really want to swing for the fences. If you want to get Eric Gordon and KJ Martin, you're probably going to have to go that high. Look at maybe using your picks as well. But as far as with the Knicks, I hadn't heard as much chatter about Jay with the Knicks. Malik Beasley gets linked to the Knicks because Gerson Rosas is in the fold with the Knicks, and Gerson Rosas was the guy who believed in Malik Beasley the most, quite frankly, in Minnesota, paid him the most out of anybody. Yeah. And I could tell you this, while they were finalizing the deal with Minnesota, that's when the Knicks called and expressed interest. I had written that on Hoops Hype a while ago, behind the scenes of when Malik Beasley ended up signing with Minnesota. So, for Gerson Rosas, that's the main, he's probably the number one Malik Beasley guy, I would argue, in the league. He certainly valued him given the contract, and the Knicks have always been open to acquiring shooting, and he's a young guy that theoretically would fit the core. I don't know about an asking price though from Utah, because for them, obviously, they're looking at future draft capital given their team, and they've got to decide if Malik is going to be a guy that they keep, whether it's with the team option or they try to do something else.
Yeah, and
Malik Beasley would be a nice.
Yeah, would be a great pickup. I would love to have him. The contract is doable, $15 million plus a team option for next season, so it definitely fits. But it doesn't seem like there's much of a wing market this year, Michael. It seems like it's more of the 2-3 combo guard. You do have Collins out there from Atlanta, but it doesn't seem like there's any true wings out there on the market right now.
I guess it depends if you think Karis LeVert is that guy,
okay, or
I don't really necessarily consider Jay Crowder a wing.
Right.
I think sometimes more he's a 4 at this point in a small ball kind of style. And yeah, like OG is kind of that 2-3. It's not like a true, unless you want to get like Jalen McDaniels from Charlotte, but he's going to be an unrestricted free agent over the summer. So you then got to pay the guy as well. So, and to my understanding, Charlotte, for them, this was a guy that was in the late second round that's been a hit for them.
Yeah.
And given their drafting, want to keep that guy. So to me, I think that's something that they got to look at, especially with the whole Miles Bridges situation.
Right.
You don't know how that's going to shake out, what the league is going to do, what he's going to make, if he ends up coming back. So a lot of balls in the air there in Charlotte. It's interesting. Of all the teams, like to me, if I'm the Charlotte Hornets, LaMelo Ball just got hurt the other night with his ankle again. If there was ever a time to sink the Titanic into the Pacific, boy, this was the year for them with Victor Wembanyama out there, Scoot Henderson. They're not a team that's going to get a star in free agency. It's not happening. They could do it through a trade, or they could do it in the draft. You can get mid-level type of guys on that roster. But just given where they're at, given the fact that they drafted Mark Williams not number one, but with their first round pick.
Yep.
I think Mark Williams is really good. I don't know why he's been with the Greensboro Swarm. I'd be playing that guy. Nick Richards, you drafted a couple of years ago. He's showing some promise now. Mason Plumlee, great veteran role player, probably better on a playoff team. I would see if maybe they can move him there. Kelly Oubre, are you going to pay him? Or is he a guy that's putting up numbers on a team that's not good? They've got a lot of guys at PJ Washington. I had written about on Hoops Hype after the rookie scale extension deadline. Those guys were far apart. PJ Washington was trying to get in the high teens to $20 million a year, and Charlotte was somewhere around, I think it was 12 to 13 million a year. That's a big gap.
Yeah.
So to me, if I'm Charlotte, I'm working the phones like a salesman at this point. To me, and I haven't necessarily heard that yet as much. Now, we got a few weeks till the deadline, but, you know, if I'm the GM, and I'm not Mitch Kupchak, but if I was, I'd be dialing it up pretty feverishly.
And we're talking to Michael Scott on hoopshype.com. Salutes everybody in the chat. Hit that thumbs up button for you boys. Al, go ahead and get to your question.
So, Michael, you've gone through the list of all the guys that other teams are up for, potentially out there on the market. A guy that the Knicks have, reportedly been open to taking calls on is Immanuel Quickley. What are your thoughts about Immanuel Quickley being on the trade market right now?
I'll say this. For Quickley, like if they could get a first-round pick for him, you could listen to it. Certainly, it's a decently high asking price. I think once he started for the Knicks, and I touched on it with Hoops Hype, that it certainly helped his value. At the time, previously, like teams like Milwaukee had called, they were looking for an upgrade over George Hill, Javon Carter, doing some due diligence. Washington, when they were guard depleted, when DeLon Wright was down and other people, they had checked in as well. But now they've gotten him back, and at this point, I don't know if they're willing to give up a first for Immanuel Quickley. If you're the Knicks and you could sell high and get a first, yeah, you consider it, no question. But I don't know. I don't think that's necessarily going to materialize. I think for them, the question is going to be, what do they think his value is, and what does his agent think his value is? Because if you're looking at a guy like Quickley, somewhere in that mid-level-ish range, that's like, 10 million, maybe 12 million a year, maybe you give him a little bit more because he's your own guy. Is that something the Knicks want to do? And is that something that Quickley wants to do? Does he think he's worth more than that? You also have to wonder, once they got Jalen Brunson, how did he feel about that? And in terms of his opportunity and production, he's still been given a decent role with the team. So I think that's something he's got to decide for himself. Can he potentially go to a team and be a combo guard that's a six-man off the bench, or is he trying to vie for a starting role? Because that's not going to happen here with the Knicks. These are all things that Immanuel Quickley knows and has to figure out long-term, and he and the Knicks have to have honest conversations behind the scenes. But if anything, I would say that once he started, he certainly helped his stock. And I think for the Knicks, there's no reason to come off of, if you're going to move him, you'd want a first-round pick at this point.
Yeah, definitely.
Is there any?
Yeah, go ahead, Al, go ahead.
No, I was going to ask, like, outside. So, do you think that? I guess what other teams out of the ones that you mentioned right now would be a Quickley candidate, or is that something that we would have to wait until the offseason?
I think. I guess you could wait till like the offseason. I'm curious what San Antonio does with Trey Jones. I'm not sure like he'd be a fit. They'd be a fit for Immanuel Quickley, but like there's some teams out there that have like a younger guard. Minnesota, obviously with D'Angelo Russell, what are they going to do there? Because it just seems like they're far apart in terms of what his value is. And if you don't trade him, you're going to lose his salary slot. You're not going to have a way to replace him, because with Gobert, Towns, and the rest of their team, financially, you're not recouping that same salary slot. So that's one reason you could see D'Angelo Russell moved at the deadline. Certainly D'Lo being rep by CAA, anybody that's a CAA client will always, for better or worse, whether it is warranted or not, they will always get linked to the Knicks. That's just how this goes. Okay. We saw it obviously with Isaiah Hartenstein over the summer.
Yeah.
So it's just what it is, So that's my stance there. But I mean, look, I know Quickley seems to be liked by a lot of Knicks fans, certainly. So I think if he was moved, they'd be a little bit upset. I wonder how they feel now. It's funny, when I tweeted about, I know we're going a little off topic, but with the Kristaps Porzingis stuff from yesterday, my mentions and my quote tweets, and I do look at them. I don't always respond.
Yeah.
If I do, maybe it's in a DM, but I see it. I get a kick out of a lot of Knicks fans saying, bring him home.
Oh, a
Knicks
ton.
fans like, bring him home.
A ton.
Forgiven.
Too many.
A ton, man. We posted the interview on Instagram, and we talked about we did react to his NBA.com interview as well. A lot of Knicks fans, let's look at the trade machine. Let's look at his contract. Bring him home. A lot of Knicks fans are leaving the light on for KP, man. I couldn't believe it. Absolutely couldn't believe it.
Different scenario, I mentioned to him after the game, like, what have you thought of your career now? I laughed when he's like, that's a good question. You always like to hear that from a player, first off. But even beforehand, so like with Stephen Bondi and we were chatting with him before the media scrum when we all, put the cameras on and stuff. I just think he's grown from when he was a kid here, essentially. And I consider him a kid. When you're in your late teens or early 20s, you're a kid. Different influences around him at the time. I think now a little different scenario there. And in a way, he talked about it. When he went to Dallas and it didn't work out, it was a bit disappointing for him. And I think in a way, it was a humbling experience, certainly. Because on paper, you thought this is the next coming of Nash and Nowitzki with Dallas. And it didn't pan out that way. He was hurt, put up decent numbers. But, in Washington, you're seeing more of the guy that put up Knicks numbers when he was an all-star. Not the same guy necessarily in terms of like putback dunks and flying. I don't think he plays as recklessly.
Yeah.
But even posting up wise, I think his face-up game he's worked on in the mid-post. Obviously shooting the three. This is a guy that I think as long as he stays healthy, he can opt out, and I think he could theoretically get a bag from Washington. They've got to try to keep him and Kuzma to me,
right?
Because, and I know there's been a lot of noise out there about Kuzma too, but if you're Washington, you just gave Bradley Beal a max extension. You pretty much gave him everything but ownership stake in the Nationals and the Capitals. So, and he's got a no trade clause,
right?
So you've got. I'm glad you got a laugh out of that one. It was good. But, so you got him there. That's your core guy. Kyle Kuzma's had put up career numbers with the Wizards, and his role has been phenomenal. I don't know where he would go and get as big a role. Porzingis, same thing. They love him. You've got your three. Can you get another core guy? That's why you saw Rui Hachimura out there. Future draft picks wise, can they take that next step? I think if anything, Washington's got to look to be a buyer.
Right.
Just because Rui's on the trade block, I don't consider that them being sellers. So a lot to monitor, certainly. But, just with KP and the Knicks, man, it just looked like I don't know, man. It's like almost like when you break up with a girl and then you wonder, maybe she wasn't as bad as, I thought.
Oh, man.
Time is healing up the wounds, man. We were wounded back then, man, when they requested the trade, man. Badly wounded.
Yeah, I mean, listen, it was a lot. It was a lot behind the scenes, and he talked about it. It was a mess.
Yeah.
It was. Yeah. There's no way around it. But I'll also say, if you want to get out, you got to make it. It's got to be a mess. That's just how it goes for an NBA player. Ask James Harden. He wrote the book on it.
Man, true story. True indeed, man. We're talking to Michael Scott of hoopshype.com. Salute to everybody in the chat. Once again, hit that thumbs up button for you boys. Let's go to the Discord and get Ari in here. Ari was at the game. He was styling and profiling behind Clyde. He was starting all night on Twitter, posting his content and whatnot. So, Ari, let's get you in here and get your takes.
What up, Scotto? Sorry from Manhattan. We chatted on Twitter before.
Yes. Future potential Hoops High podcast. This guy was a character. I loved Ari.
He's toxic, man. Toxic.
How's it like it is? Yeah. What's up, Ari? How are you?
I'm good, man. I'm good. I was at the game yesterday. I'm gonna take credit for putting Jericho Sims in the game. I was telling Tibbs all night, put Sims in the game. Put Sims in the game. I was sitting right behind Breen. It took my 5th time to get him to put Sims in the game, but he finally put him in the game. When Julius Randle came out, me and like 5 guys behind me gave a standing ovation to Tibbs to put Obi Toppin in the game. So we're trying to do it. But listen, love the content, Scotto. You know, this whole talk right now is just depressing to me, man, because it's like, oh, great, Tobias Harris, so we could win 5 games in the playoffs instead of take the series 5 games instead of getting swept and just pay the guy, you know, $37 million. It's really exciting to me. You know what I mean? So I'm trying to sell, man. Is there any chance that Quickley, listen, man, if you give me an unprotected first rounder, I would do it. I don't think you're going to get that
Nobody's
for him.
Doing that. I hate to break your heart.
Yeah, I know. But the advanced analytics love him, and you know, he actually plays both sides of the ball. I'd keep him. But is there any do you see the Knicks, a successful trade deadline to me is if the Knicks don't trade any picks? Do you feel like at the end of the day they're going to trade some picks for Zach LaVine or for or another borderline or Kuzma or something like that? Or do you think they're going to keep the picks? Because as long as they keep the picks, I don't care who we get, I'm fine. But I'm just paranoid that we're going to trade the picks. And my second question to you is there any chance that we trade in Julius Randle, bro? Those are my 2 questions.
Here we go.
Those are my 2 questions. Thank you for the call, guys.
Shout out to Ari, man. Shout out to Ari.
Okay.
I felt that last one coming.
Let me start with Julius Randle. We'll work backwards. So with Julius, I mean, this is a guy that's in the All-Star conversation. I don't think, and I think somebody. I don't know if somebody had mentioned about maybe like Tobias earlier in the year that maybe it was an internal thought or something like that. The only way that would have worked was maybe I'm thinking of the Knicks salaries. Theoretically, the only way that would have worked was Julius at the beginning of the year when he wasn't playing as good, but he's become an all-star. I don't necessarily see that. I don't think Julius Randle gets traded. At this point, could something happen maybe down the line? You never know. Maybe in the offseason they see where they, you know, if they make the playoffs and they don't do well, then maybe you got to reevaluate things. Right now, my gut would tell me probably not. In terms of trading, Ari asked about like trading picks for Kuzma and some other guys.
LaVine or Kuzma.
I think for what I mean, Ari has been probably number 1 on the Kuzma bandwagon. I've seen this on Twitter. But I think when it comes to Kyle, I just ideally, you know, Washington doesn't want to give him up. They don't. I think you're going to have to overpay to get Kyle Kuzma because in Washington's eyes, they've got the money to pay him. You know, you got the rights. And it's like at the same time, he's not going to have a bigger role really anywhere. Like Washington really empowers him. And I think they're banking on that. Like he talks about like, you know, where is going to be best for his development. If that's really what it's about and they could pay you, I don't see why you'd be going anywhere. So to me, that's where I'm at. I don't think, as far as the Knicks moving picks, I don't think Zach LaVine's not readily available right now from Chicago. If that changes, maybe I'll reassess the thinking, but he's not readily available right now. So I don't see the Knicks giving up picks. Like if you're going to give up those picks, you got to be getting a star back. You wait down the line, I think, for over the summer. You see where teams are at because right now there's so much parity in the league. I know this is like what the league wanted, but it's also like, okay, now everybody's all bunched together. Everybody's afraid to make a move. And even the teams that are bad, like Charlotte, you know, all due respect, Charlotte and Detroit, it's like, well, Detroit's like, well, we don't want to move Bojan Bogdanovic, you know. It's like, well, damn it. Like, that is the... What is happening to the trade market is my question. We got too much parity. So from that aspect, Ari, I don't see the Knicks looking to dangle picks unless they're going to get a star back. Now, you tell me down the line if like a Karl Towns ever became available, then maybe I would, rethink that one. You know what I'm saying? But that one, again, this is off-season stuff, guys.
Yeah.
Off-season, not now. Not February 9th.
We should have just got Spider-Man. In conclusion, we should have just got Spider-Man. Oh, it's painful, man. It's tough.
Look. Yeah. Simply put, yeah. Like the guy, isn't he I think Donovan's 25, 26, signed for the next 3 years at the minimum, then has a 4th-year option.
Yep. Yeah.
Wanted, I don't care what anybody says. He would have came here. Like he would have been happy to come here, and it didn't happen. Now you can make the argument. Some people will make the argument behind the scenes around the league. Well, did Danny Ainge ever really want to trade him to the Knicks? Yeah.
But I mean, if you look at how marketing is playing,
business. But you know what? Nobody knew that Lowry Markkanen was going to be that good, and I don't think Danny Ainge and them knew that he was going to be that good. We've seen this before when he would play, Euro Cup, international competition. He would kill it. I think they've given him the biggest role that he can have, and it's worked out great for him. But anybody that's like, yeah, we knew he was going to put up these numbers.
No, you couldn't.
Cap, major cap. Like, stop it.
Yeah.
And I like Lowry. Good player, good guy.
Probably most improved. I get most improved this year.
Certainly in the conversation, no question.
Yeah.
But, I don't know. Like, is somebody going to vote for, like, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander because, like, he's, like, a top 5 guard now, coming off 20? That most improved player vote, to me, always should be a guy that kind of came out of nowhere. Like, the year that, like, Brandon Ingram won, I was like, bro, he was the 2nd pick.
Yeah, right.
Pick. What were you expecting?
Yeah.
I'd hope so.
Didn't Ja Morant win last season? That was the worst.
Even Ja Morant was like, I don't need this.
Yeah, right. He's in
Ja
the MVP
Morant's like, you want to give me
conversation.
MVP? All right, I'll look at that down the line. Ja Morant was more pushing for like Dylan Brooks, Jaren Jackson, for defensive player of the year. And I love Ja Morant about that. Wonderful teammate. Have a hype man. Have somebody hype you up like Ja Morant hypes up his Grizzlies teammates. No question.
Hey, just means that it should go to Jalen Brunson, man. That's what it means. Jalen Brunson
worth every penny and more. I will say that. And a lot of people thought certainly he got more than people thought he would get on the free agent market, and some wondered if maybe if they overpaid for him slightly. He's been worth every penny and more.
Yeah.
Definitely in the All-Star conversation. And the biggest thing I could say about Jalen Brunson, he is a winning basketball player. He just does things on the floor. High IQ, competes every night, wants to be here. For the Knicks, really couldn't ask more of a guy that you were targeting. But yeah, I think if they had Donovan Mitchell, I think the Knicks would be certainly, it wouldn't even be a question of whether they'll eventually be a play-in team or not. They would certainly, in my opinion, be top 6. That said, I do think the East, I would have put them right there with like Cleveland outside the top 4. So, we'll see what the future holds, fellas.
We shall see what the future holds, man. And another question I got is, how did Ari bypass our security screening in the Discord? TM, we got to work on our security parameters, man.
He went straight to the VIP?
He went straight to the VIP.
Went straight to the line, right?
Yeah, and unmuted his mic. We got security protocols for this type of thing. We got call screeners for this type of thing. We got to figure out how Ari got the VIP, man. We got to check his permissions and his privileges on the Discord, man. The guy
did that to me he did that to me earlier this week. I was like,
yeah,
what?
Oh man. Listen, he's a day one listener. That's my guy. He is VIP on this show. We do, we do allow him some leeway. This is a family show, but we let him go off when he wants to go off. But, we got to look into that, man. We got to keep this thing tight. But, Michael, man, definitely appreciate the time. Very last minute, you jumped on and shared some time with us. So we definitely appreciate it. 3 weeks away from the deadline, man. If the Knicks make any moves, we'd love to have you back on, man.
Sure thing. Always happy to chat and rap. My pleasure in joining you guys. And I've seen you obviously do stuff with Beggs, Fred Katz, aka Fredo Katz. That's an inside joke with all my guys.
I'm gonna check about that.
I love Fred, I do, but we always joke with him. Sometimes I'll call him Frederick as a joke. But, always good seeing those guys at the arena. And yeah, man, look, the Knicks, certainly all eyes are going to be on Cam Reddish heading into the trade deadline. And I think looking ahead towards maybe more the offseason when his contract would be essentially expiring at that point would be Evan Fournier. So the Knicks are always going to have some flexibility and options, but we'll certainly wrap again. Going to take some calls here in a little bit, but it was a pleasure joining you guys. We'll certainly do it again.
Absolutely, man. And for you people in the chat, follow him at Mike A. Scotto, 2 T's on Twitter, and Hoops Hype.
Like the lotto.
And hoopshype.com, man. Maybe one day the Knicks will hit the lotto and be a good team. All right, man. We'll see you guys on Friday. Peace.